Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And according to information we received during the previous nights of Ukrainian time, we can make a conclusion that the Russians began the final assault. The final assault of the significant number of towns, cities and villages along the line of combat contact between the villages of Prichistovka and the city of Selydove. Currently, the Russians are storming the village of Bogoyavlenka. There are very heavy clashes in Katerinovka and between the Katerinovka itself and Maximilianovka. The Russians entered the first buildings of Kurakhove. The Russians shown the real geolocations that confirm control over Zoryane, and currently there are very heavy clashes in the territory of Hirnyk. And the most important, the Russians managed to encircle and to block the Ukrainian forces on the territory of the city of Selydove. So today, on the 21st of October, most likely will go into history, and not just because of the because of all these events that we've just discussed. You know that the Russians have chosen this date, the 21st of October, for a reason. It's not like accident date. For example, I would like to remind you, because I believe that you have already forgotten about this, but on the 21st of October of 2023 we got another important update, another important victory that the Russians managed to achieve. And this is, for example, the situation on the 21st of October of 2023, and right exactly in this date, right exactly a year ago, the neutral mappers confirmed for the first time since the beginning of the battle for Avdiivka that the Russians managed to take under control the waste heap. They managed to take under control the Avdiivka Terikon, and that was the turning point in the battle, not just for Avdiivka, but as we can see right now, that was the turning point in the battle for the Pokrovsk, because right exactly a year ago the edge Russian positions were moved and covered the territory of the waste heap of Avdiivka, and now we see that year after the Russians managed to move much further in the western direction to break the significant number of defense belts and defense lines of the armored forces of Ukraine. And today, a year after, the Russians began the clashes for the cities of Selydove, began clashes for Hirnyk-Kurakhove agglomeration, and began a final assault of the South Donbas direction. And 3 days later, on the 21st of October, we got the video confirmation of Russian control over the landfill and the waste heap that was published by the Russian sources. We have the video with the Russian flag, and this is the moment. And as you can see, a year ago, exactly a year ago, the Russians 114th motorized motor rifle brigade managed to take under control the Avdiivka waste heap. And today, a year after, in the October of 2024, most of the settlements, most of the village were captured by the Russians by the same brigade. There are, of course, separate additional brigades that involved in the operation of the Pokrovsk offensive, but the main job was done exactly by 114th Brigade. Now let's discuss everything in details, and first let's talk about the first assault in the direction of Bogoyavlenka. As you can see, we have changes on the ground, and this video shows how the Russian troopers were storming and attacking the Ukrainian positions along this stronghold. There are Ukrainian forces that were trying to hide in these trenches, but the Russians cleared and secured the territory and took under control. So this is the changes on the ground. So this is the situation on the 20th of October, and this is the situation on the 21st of October. The Russians shown us the significant gains and significant results. Furthermore, as for different pro-Russian mappers, currently the Russian forces moved even further, deeper, further and closer in the territory, to the territory of the Bogoyavlenka. And if we summarize everything, this approximately that show us different pro-Russian resources. As you can see, the significant progress, and currently possibly the possible distance between edge Russian positions from this area to the village of Bogoyavlenka is already around 1 kilometer, and the same story, the same distance between possible Russian positions and the stronghold, the main stronghold of Bogoyavlenka, is already less than 500 meters. So if the Russians are able to take this stronghold under control, we can start counting days when Bogoyavlenka falls. And now let's move further. We have changes on the ground between Konstantinov and Pobeda. Today the pro-Ukrainian sources published the video how they're trying to attack the Russian offensive. In this video we can see the significant number of total tanks that were attacking the Ukrainian positions. The Ukrainians sent a significant number of drones to slow down the Russians. Some of the vehicles were damaged, some of them were destroyed, but there are a lot of episodes, as you can see, and 2 episodes were geolocated exactly along this defense belt. Based on this video we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. So these are the changes on the ground ground during the previous 24 hours. As you can see, this dense network of the fortifications used to be under complete Ukraine control, but as for the 21st of October, the territory came under the Russians' control. Now let's talk about Kurakhove, and today we got very important video from the first outskirts, from the first buildings on the outskirts of Kurakhove itself. As you can see, there is something like residential area with the small buildings, but this is Kurakhove. This is a garden society Raduga, and this is the Russian flag in the most eastern, let's say, outskirts of this garden society. And based on this video, most of the mappers have adjusted their maps in Russian favor. And furthermore, additionally, we have progress on the ground that was reported by neutral mappers. Based on these two icons, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor, and as we can see, the Russians are getting closer and closer to the heart of the South Donbas direction, to the city of Kurakhove. Now let's talk about Hirnyk and Kurakhove. During the previous 24 hours, during the previous night, we received a significant number of reports. The Russians began their final assault operation. Most likely during this week, the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back from this territory completely. The most important is that the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation published us the video that they managed to establish complete control over Zoryane. I'll remind you that a few days ago, 2 days probably, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation has already reported that the city, the village of Zoryane was captured by the Russians and secured by the Russians completely, but most of the mappers didn't believe the Russians, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, and they just adjusted the territory around the village of Avdiivka. But we colored in Russian favor based on the Ministry of Defense report, and 2 days after, so today, on the 21st of October, as you can see, the Russians published the video of how they were clearing and securing the territory of the settlement. And in the final part of the video, we can see the Russian flag, and the position of Russian flag was geolocated exactly in this point. So we have no doubts that the village of Zoryane was captured by the Russians, and now the Russians are moving further in the direction of Kurakhove, which been bombed by the Russians significantly. In this video, we can see the process of artillery preparation before the final assault. The significant number of FABs arrived right exactly on the Ukrainian positions, which most likely force either the Ukrainians to fall back or to surrender. As for the northern direction, there are very heavy clashes, and the most important, that the Russians managed to take under control this stronghold. This is the biggest strongholds that the Ukrainians have been holding for a very long period of time, and this is the changes on the ground for the previous 24 hours. As you can see, the stronghold was captured by the Russians, and the Russians managed to improve their positions in the northern and the northwestern part of the Hirnyk. So these two territories were captured on the eastern and on the western side of the railways that goes from Hirnyk to the south in direction of Kurakhove. So final assault has begun. Now let's talk about the city of Selydove, and the sources are saying that the Ukrainians were completely blocked in the territory of the settlement. We don't know for sure the exact number of forces that are currently located on the territory of the citadel of the Selydove, but most likely we're talking about 1.5 brigades. So a brigade and a half was blocked by the Russians. Currently the Ukrainians are trying to get as close as possible to the main evacuation road, but it's already unsafe to use this road for let's say evacuation purposes. We are talking about M30 road, because the Russians have already established complete fire control over this territory. We have some changes on the ground. Some of them were confirmed, some of them wasn't confirmed. For example, the Russians managed to improve their positions along the railways, and this information today was confirmed by neutral mappers. Significant progress. The Russians have positions on the outskirts of Avdiivka, of Vishnyovo village, and the Russians managed to cut the road physically. This is very important. As for the last supply road, the Russians established complete FPV drone control, but it's very unsafe to use this road for evacuation because the road goes through the fields. As you can see, there are no problems for the Russians to control the territory with FPV drones. We still haven't received even a single video that was published, let's say, from the Russian Sudoplatov FPV drone squad that they managed to destroy something along this road, but most likely this is already the death road for the Ukrainians, so let's wait for additional updates. And now, as you can see, we have colored the territory of the mine and the waste heap of Karachenka in Russian favor. And we made these changes based on the video that was published by the Ukrainian sources. In this video, for example, we can see how the Ukrainian FPV drone operators were flying and attacking the Russian forces that were moving exactly in this part of Selydove to the south, so the waist hip, and in the northeastern part of Selydove itself. Right exactly in this place, the Ukrainians were FPV droning the Russians. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. And if we rewind the situation back for a few days, we see how the situation was developing. The Russians were attacking. Just yesterday we got the final confirmation of control over the eastern part of the mine and over the eastern part of Selydove. Today we got report that the waist hip was captured by the Russians completely. Significant progress, and according to different mappers, the Russians began their final assault in the direction of the northern high-rise building area, because this is the key region for complete encirclement, the complete blockade, and creation of a cauldron for around 1.5 brigades of the armored forces of Ukraine. So I'll try to draw some lines for better understanding. If the Russians during the upcoming 24 hours are able to take under control this territory, then this is going to be the end for the Ukrainians. And the most important, that the city of Selydove would be captured by the Russians, telling the truth, without being destroyed or damaged much. So obviously after the end, and when the front line moves further in the western and in the northern direction, people will be able to return back to Selydove and to continue their normal life, because it's not something like Volchansk, which the city was reduced to ruins. It's not something like Mariinka. The battle for Selydove started just a month ago, and most likely the Russians haven't destroyed the city during the battle, and the Ukrainians as well. So this is a very big achievement. As for the Russians, as for the situation in Mirnograd direction, I'll remind you that just yesterday and the day before yesterday we have colored the territory of mine of Novogrodovka III under Ukraine control, and the Russians are storming this area, and the Russians establish more or less reliable FPV drone control over the main supply road of the coal mine. And in this video we can see the significant number of FPV drone attacks on Ukrainian vehicles to the north of the mine, and this video confirms that the Russians cut the main supply roads from Mirnograd to this mine itself, and it means that the final storm in this direction has already started as well. Now let's move further. As for the Chasiv Yar direction, the Russians are moving. Today the pro-Russian sources reported about additional progress on the ground of the armored force of Russian Federation along M32 road, and the Russians are heading towards the Stupochki, and so it's like according to a small let's say planning. And as for the global planning, the Russians are moving in the direction of Konstantinovka. The Russians are trying to cut the city of Chasiv Yar from Konstantinovka itself. At least they try to cut first of all, the Russians are trying to outflank the city of Chasiv Yar. This is the tactics that the Russians have begun using recently, and we see that this tactics is very effective and very useful. Now let's move further. We are not going to talk about the Siversk direction, about the Kupiansk directions, because we haven't received anything during the previous 24 hours, just regular things. And very interesting updates are coming from the Kursk offensive, from the Kursk direction. After the very short operational pause, the Russians resumed their offensive operation, counter-offensive operation. And for example, the pro-Russians mappers reported that as a result of clashes, the Russians took under control the village of this village. It's not a Sudra, it's the village of Kalmakov. This is the village of Kalmakov, and this is, for example, these are the changes on the ground for the previous 24 hours. This is very important improvement, because the Russians basically enter the Sudra agglomeration, and we have the significant number of geolocations of different attacks of FPV drones, FAB artillery, exactly to the north of Sudra itself. And this video and this concentration of fire confirms that most likely the Russians have launched artillery preparation before the final assault in this direction as well. The Russians most likely are going to attack Ruskaya Porечная, Cherkasskaya Porечная, Martinovka, so every single settlement in the north, to the north and to the northeast of the city of Sudzha. We expect additional updates on this direction. As for the village of Volgovka, today the pro-Ukrainian mappers reported that the village of Volgovka was secured completely, and the edge Ukraine positions in this cauldron are located on the territory of this forest. So as you can see, the 21st of October is a very complicated day for the Ukrainians. Let's wait for additional update during the day. Most likely the day is going to be very hot. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.